taking this career shift and now there's postnatal depression involved. What was it like for you going through the postnatal depression?
It was scary. What does that mean? What does that mean for my children? Does that mean I'm not a good mum? That was the start of that spiral into that depression, which just comes naturally. My mum, my grandma, my Auntie Betty, very matriarchal. There was nothing you couldn't do because you were a woman. And I just did not know that there were things that you shouldn't do. We need to be able to start teaching our daughters how to be investing, how to invest safely.
How have you found it, though, being a female in a very dominated male industry?
Yeah, I love it. I don't care.
Colette, welcome to the Inspired by Show.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for coming here. I know this is something that we've been talking about, you know, having you on the show and talking about your inspiring story. I'm curious to know, Colette, we'll start with you and a bit of your background. Now, you're known as a property investor, and I've got to be really honest with you. I love that I've got you on the show because you're the very first female property investor we've had on the show.
Amazing.
And I'm sure you'll relate with this, but a lot of property experts, investors, developers, it's a very male-dominated industry. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but let's start with you and why property?
Yeah, why property? It started sort of 12 years ago now, maybe a little bit before, but it took time to get the first one. We were about to have our second child. We've got 2 children, Luke and Georgia, and Craig and I both had okay jobs. We were never going to set the world on fire, and we were just having those, you know, looking forward conversations. And it came up one day, how would we ever retire? You know, how will we ever pay the bills when we do want to retire? We loved all the property programs. We used to watch them all the time. And a chance chat with my mum where I said, we'd love to do, you know, a development one day or buy something and do it up. She's like, you know, your dad's always wanted to do that. And it sort of went from there, and we pooled resources, and I was looking around all the properties and was self-taught to go and look at the auctions. I'm a contract manager by trade. I was at Accenture for the last 12 years of my corporate career, and it just fits really nicely. The transferable skills from being a contract manager into looking at property and due diligence and risk was quite felt a very natural and easy step to do.
I love that though, because it's very, like you say, it's transferable, but there was still parts of you that was still in that role, probably thinking, oh, you know, I'm happy there, don't really need anything else. What actually pushed you to then take the leap? Because I often find a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to get into property one day. I'd love to do that business one day. What was it that actually forced you to take the leap and go, I'm going to do this?
I think probably having our second child and thinking we need to do something to start building a pension pot. We didn't have significant pensions. Craig had a very small one. I'd not started mine with Accenture yet at that time. And then once Dad was on board as well, it gave me a target and something to be. It's that accountability, isn't it? It wasn't a one day for us. It now becomes an accountability to say to Dad, this is what I'm looking at. This is where we're at. And once I started looking at the auctions, I was hooked. And so I probably have a file of, 10 or 20 auction properties before we actually got the first one.
Wow.
Because you can be at an auction, you can have done all the due diligence and work in the world, and on the second bid, it might have gone 50 grand over what your top bid is, and you're finished, and you have no idea of that before you get in the room.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people watch these sort of Homes Under the Hammer and all these TV programs. I'm one of those people that quite likes to binge watch those, and it sounds by your nodding, you definitely had a few of those. But I think that people feel like it is this sort of, you know, dream world of, I'm going to put money on an auction and I'm going to buy a property and I'm going to do it up and I'm going to make millions. You know, what were you expecting to have when you got into the property world?
Yeah, I was expecting to take it slower, take it smaller. And it's the risk assessment side for me always is the right, where do you think this is going? Why is the property at auction? What are the issues with it? Can they be overcome? And if they can't, what's your worst case scenario? And if you can work down your absolute worst case scenario, and will that destroy you or will you be okay? Nobody wants to go to worst case scenario. Nobody wants to lose money, but will you be okay? And what I found in property is that the answer is generally yes to that. If you have your eyes open, you understand your due diligence, it's actually quite difficult to lose everything in property. The property is always going to be worth something, even if you do make a loss. So then you can understand, right, how do we move that forward so we don't get into that position?
Such an interesting way of looking at it. Because a lot of people are scared of getting into property because they feel like they're going to lose it all.
Because that's what you see in the press, right? If they're going to put a story in the press, it's going to be about losing everything. Generally, if you lose everything, it's either because you've been ripped off, there's been a criminal element in there, which you can't, we can all be subject to a crime. There's not a lot you can do on that side. Or because you've stuck your head in the sand because you don't want to admit that it's gone wrong and you leave it too long and something gets repossessed. That's probably the only way where you're going to end up losing. And even if something's repossessed, there'll be money sold and something will be cleared in your debt.
So you wanted to start slow and steady. Did you start slow and steady?
No, timing's everything, isn't it? We, as I say, because of the way that the auctions went, the first one that we were successful on, we actually completed on as I was having Georgia. I was taken into hospital earlier than expected. So my husband had to deal with getting the place renovated and let out to tenants whilst I was in the hospital. And then 6 weeks later, our world imploded. My brother very sadly lost his wife. She was hit by a car just before Christmas. They had a 2-year-old son, as did we. He's only 2 years older than me, so he was 34 at the time. It was a heartbreaking, really, really difficult time. And within a week or so of that, I'd been diagnosed with postnatal depression, and everything just always seems to snowball at once, doesn't it? But long story short, they needed, in my eyes, they needed that same financial long-term protection, Daniel and Jamie, that we were putting together for ourselves. And so I took Daniel to look at some auction properties we were looking at. And I asked him if he wanted to be involved, and that, again, we were doing it as a pension pot. We weren't doing it to flip them and make money and move on. We were doing something for the future, and it would be the future for our children as well. And he said yes, and without knowing anything about it at the time, that was probably the start of setting up a investor-developer relationship. And I guess looking back, it's classic avoidance. But over that 12 months of mat leave, I bought 9 properties altogether. So 8 of them tenanted. So we had a full portfolio of tenanted properties, and 1 that we bought for ourselves, and we moved house. We moved house twice because I accidentally made us homeless. But yeah.
Wow, as you do. Yeah, what happened there?
We found a property we wanted to move to. And so I put the equity in our current property. I kept the property that we were living in and put that equity into the portfolio pot. So actually we went up to 9 rented properties plus our properties. That was the 10. And my biggest fear there was having 2 mortgages. Because the flats and the little house that we bought first, they were all tenanted and they were great. But we'd be moving out of our 4-bedroom house into a new, bigger house, and that needed to be let. And the thought of having those 2 mortgages was really scary. And a friend who was helping me, who was in property, had said, "You'll be fine. You'll always get a sort of 4 to 6 weeks because nobody's going to rent a property 4-bed on from nothing. They will be in a property that they need to give notice on. They'll already be renting." And a family came to see it, and they had family who were living abroad who were coming back, and they said, "We want it, but we want it in 2 weeks." And I just said yes, and then worry about it afterwards.
Wow.
Tell Craig afterwards. We've got to be out in 2 weeks, but we won't have any financial worries.
I love that, Colette, you started this by saying you're quite risk averse.
I didn't say I was risk averse. I'm very good at risk assessment.
That was it, sorry. Very good at risk assessment. And then it's like, P.S. we're moving out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
Oh, and
I went and bought a car at auction as well because I had a little Mercedes that didn't fit very much in, so I went and bought a RAV4 that I still got, that everybody now hates because I've had it for so long. But it's my trusty steed, and I pretty much moved us from our house into this little house. I just get filling the car up and the baby, and drive to the house, and then take everything out, and then sit down and have a cry, and then drive back and start all over again. And go, right, just keep going, we'll get there.
So all of this was going on. All of this was going on when you were on maternity.
Yeah.
And with the postnatal depression.
Yeah. And with a 3-year-old and Georgia. By the time we moved house, Georgia was 10, 11 months old. And we just moved into this little it was my friend's 2-bed. And I went to see her and I said, we are going to need it and we're going to need it in 2 weeks. And she was the same lady who'd said to me, you'll have at least 4 weeks. And I've ripped the bathroom and the kitchen out because that never happens, Colette. I said, it's fine, we'll take it anyway. So Craig put the bathroom in. So we had a bath and a toilet and a sink, but the walls were bare plaster. And the kitchen had been taken out but put in the garden because there wasn't a driveway access and they were going to get a skip delivered and take it all out, and we just brought it back in.
Oh my gosh. So it's like all at once.
All at once.
Yeah, why
do
not?
Everything all at once, yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about the postnatal depression as well of all this stuff going on because, you know, as you said, it does all come at once, and you just taken this leap of faith. Obviously, you hadn't left your job, you were on maternity, but you've taken this career shift, let's be honest, quite a big step that some people never really take. You have a baby and now there's postnatal depression involved. What was it like for you going through the postnatal depression? Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favour to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode.
I didn't see it, which sounds, I think for anybody that knows me, and even looking back, I find it bizarre to say I just couldn't see it. One of the things, when they first asked me to go for the test, to be assessed for it, I was actually worried I was taking up somebody else's time that might really have postnatal depression, because I'm going through this grief. I've got this going on and I'll probably be all right in a bit. And then we went and I was assessed and they were like, no, you've clearly got postnatal depression. Okay. And it's a scary thing to be told, because you only see very scary things in the press of it. And if it's in when it's shown in TV soaps and things like that, it's always a very, very dark side of it. And I had a more, what they call sort of a high functioning. Obviously, I went and did all of that whilst I was being treated for the postnatal depression. But it was scary. It was, you know, what does that mean? What does that mean for my children? Does that mean I'm not a good mum? All of those things. Very lucky to be living in Oxfordshire, very close to the Oxford hospitals. Excellent support from the minute they diagnosed me. They got me into a programme within a couple of weeks. And they were very... so I was seeing a therapist every couple of weeks, and she was able to reassure me that, you know, they met me with the children, that everything was fine. And I'd grown up with children in the family, babysitting, all those sorts of things. So physically taking care of them, I didn't have any issue with at all. So yeah, it was okay. It was really difficult, but I couldn't really see it at the time.
As something I can really relate to from my own experience with clinical depression, one of the biggest things I struggled with was the denial of it. I was totally unaware of it. And it's similar to you, when the doctor said to me, oh, I think you're depressed, I honestly thought, like, no, you're talking to somebody else. Like, you're not looking at me. I think you've got the wrong person. And isn't it fascinating how someone else can see something in us that we can't because we're so high functioning?
Yeah. And I just, it's exactly as you said, I just couldn't see it. And they, you know, I remember vividly being asked once why I didn't ask for help. And I was like, well, I didn't know that I needed it. Nobody had talked to me before. And whilst I was pregnant, they talked to you about the signs for postnatal depression, but they're very... you know, are you feeling suicidal, and do you feel like you might hurt your baby, and those, and I didn't have any of that side of the postnatal depression. I wasn't on that side of things. I don't know how, you know, I went and I saw somebody and they did a brilliant talk where they said, actually, most women have postnatal depression. It's a spectrum that we're all on. And if you don't find out, because they did say to me, it's likely I had it when I had Luke and I just didn't realise. And again, I can look back and I can see that. And it's in the confidence lacking and the anxiety and, you know, worrying about what people would think on a crazy levels. And they said that it's because it's so hormonal that you get this dip and we're all on it. But if you're functioning, nobody notices, and then you'll naturally recover at 18 months. And that's why so many babies are between 2 and 3 years apart.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it is a hormonal thing. And I think it's fascinating how somebody else can spot it in us because they're not emotionally connected and they can see the logical side of it. When you say you didn't have those sort of symptoms, what did you have, or what happened after the sort of denial bubble was popped and you could start to see things?
I don't know. And I think the brain's a really strange thing. There's a lot of it that I don't remember. So I find that quite a difficult question to answer because there's so much that is just sort of gone, if that makes sense. And I just carried on doing, and they put me in a program, and I'm very good at doing as I'm told. So come and have these talks, come and do some journaling. So I was doing some journaling around it. They got me to do a group therapy where you went with your baby. It's terrible. I don't think it's taken off. I think it was quite a new thing because I used to come out that good. That is the most depressing thing ever, to be in a room of 4 women, all with postnatal depression and with their crying babies. And at least you drive home going, well, I feel better that we're not in that room anymore.
Maybe that's it. Reverse psychology.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. You're like the first person I've talked to about this that's had a really similar experience to me. So I'm exactly the same. I can hardly remember anything of when I had the depression. And people ask me about it all the time, which is why I'm curious to be like, am I the only one that blacked it out?
It's not in a bad way. I think that's the other thing, is it feels really scary and it's going to be this horrible time that you have to recover from. I didn't have a horrible time. We have some really lovely experiences and everything was okay. And it was just, I think there's lots of it that you would naturally, as we get older, you naturally go through different things and anxiety and those things build. And I can look back and I can see where I'd had some issues. I'd hurt my knee years before. And I remember thinking about, oh, well, I'll never be a good mum if I can't get down on the floor and kneel and play with and you look back and go, that was the start of that spiral into that depression, which just comes naturally. And actually, by having the postnatal depression, by having the therapy, by having all of the tools that they get you to think about, they're things that help me just in life in general. Because I find it easier to deal with certain things because of that, and to take a step back from stuff. I always remember one of the things that she said to me is about, it's your choice how you react to something. And I thought she was crazy. I was like, no, if someone pissed me off, that's not a choice, and she's like, no, it's your choice, and it's your choice whether you're gonna, if it's with your husband and you're having a row, it's your choice whether you're doing that. And the brilliant example that she used was, if a car cuts you up and you hung on the horn and you're really cross and you drive home and you effing and jeffing about and telling what this stupid driver did, that driver has no inclination that you're upset. They've gone. So why are you still worrying about it? You're choosing to do that. They're not impacting you. They've already gone. And that, I think, is something that I take forward into life and how I deal with stuff.
Yeah. I always believe that when we go through these things, we always choose what we take from it.
Yeah.
And you can still use, you don't have to journal. You don't have to journal only when you're feeling depressed. You can journal any point,
Yeah.
and it's tools and techniques that we can use. Now, obviously, this was going on for you when you were also going through the grief. So what was the difference about the grieving process?
I don't think you can separate. Because they happen so together, you just can't separate them. I think the difference probably is it probably felt more like that it was grief for longer, and that I couldn't separate the two. I'd have recovered from the grief quicker, more likely, if it wasn't for the postnatal depression, because it was my sister-in-law. But yeah, I can't separate the two because they happened right at the same time. So it was, and probably, one triggered the other. I don't know.
Yeah. And I find it really interesting that obviously you came in and you did help. You were looking at how can we help you? How can we make sure you've got the same protection that we have? Was there any pressure to that? Oh, he's going through this and, you really want to make sure you support them. What if it goes
It's a
wrong?
massive pressure that I put on myself. a massive pressure that, you know, my dad and my brother would never put on me, and would hate to hear even, and I'm sure they will. But yeah, that was a massive pressure. And I probably couldn't see that at the time either. But it's the same pressure that I take. I take in private investment now, and it's the same pressure that I do for that. So when I'm investing my money, I will do that relatively easily. When I'm investing other people's money, I just have to go, right, let's just double check in my head that I've done the full due diligence on where am I getting their monies back in the event that something goes wrong. And I was absolutely all over that once Daniel and my dad were investing. And Daniel made a flip comment once about it's easy to take risk with other people's money. And I was like, whoa, stop right there. And then I took him through everything, and he was laughing. He was like, it was a joke. I was like, I don't care. You need to understand everything that we've done.
Yeah.
This is where it's all protected.
Yeah. You're like, actually, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah. And it really is the complete opposite every time. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And obviously, like you mentioned, you've then gone on to continue your property journey. So at what point did you sort of sit back and go, do you know what? I am a female property investor, and I'm actually doing pretty damn good.
That took a really long time. So because this was a pension pot, and we bought these, we were at 9 or 10 properties by then. We didn't touch it, and we just let it build up, and then it would build up and we'd invest again. And so that meant that at the end of the 12-month mat leave, we weren't taking anything out of this. So I had to go back to work. So I went back to work part-time, and I used to run the property portfolio in the 2 days a week that I wasn't working at Accenture. And then I was back at Accenture for another 9 years or so.
Wow.
And did really well. When I first went back, I took extended mat leave because I'd not quite finished going through the stuff with the postnatal depression, and it was real kill or cure. I didn't know how I'd get on going back to work. Went back in onto a project that was struggling. They needed help. It was full on, and it was just what I needed. It really was cure stuff. And we smashed it, and we fixed this contract that had been wasn't having its invoices paid. The client relationship was at an all-time low. All of these things, and I was asked to put myself forward for promotion. Massive confidence, imposter syndrome. I was like, there's no way I should be doing that. I won't be able to handle the promotion. And at Accenture, they have a great career counselling and mentoring package. And my career counsellor at the time was like, Colette, you are already doing what you think you shouldn't be going for the promotion for. Will you just look at the forms? And I looked at the forms, and the first one was like, yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing that. And I got to the end of it. I was like, yeah, I am doing all of this. How did I not know that? I potentially should have put myself forward for promotion earlier, but I had no clue because I never looked at my peers or how that was working. Put myself forward for promotion, and it was just horrible. You have to write your own promotion pack about why you're good and why, and I couldn't do it. I was incapable. And luckily, my director has to sign it off, and he just took a massive red pen to it. And everything that I'd written, there was very self-depreciating language around what I'd maybe helped and how I'd supported, and I've just, reorganized and did. He changed to a very fact-based, what was the impact of what Colette did? And so his written form said Colette came in and she cleared 50 outstanding change notices, and we've now been paid 3 million that had been held in invoices whilst this was under negotiation. And then the intangible meant that there was work that was going on outside of contract cover that had all been cleared, and we went on to then be invited to bid for more work, and we won a £20 million contract off the back of it. And I read what he'd written, and I was like, that's right. And I that is the impact of what I'd done. And whilst I couldn't have sat there and gone, oh, I'm an amazing and please promote me, I was really comfortable with saying these are the things that I've achieved. So then you fast forward to lockdown and all that, and I was ready for a new challenge because I'd put myself forward promotion again, got it, but I had fallen into the same trap again where I'd not put myself forward early enough. So I felt, well, I've just been promoted, but I feel at the top of that tree again. I need a new challenge. I managed to negotiate a redundancy because they were doing some redundancies at the time, which gave me a little bit of breathing space. And a friend had said to me, what do you really want to do? Because I was looking at other commercial roles. So I love property and I love helping people. When I talk to people at Accenture and I talk about the property, everyone says, like you said at the beginning, I'd love to do it. I'd love to be involved. And I said, well, this is how you do it. And Accenture is all about consultancy and support and outsourcing. Maybe I could outsource myself and help people to buy property for a fee, for a commission. Should is the role in that? So I've got no idea, but let's go and find out. And of course, now I know there's a whole industry around it. It's property sourcing, and you have to be compliant. And I went and did all of those things to help other people. And through the property sourcing, I absolutely was underselling myself completely, because I was like, how do I go and help people to do this? How do I? And I was sourcing a project and working with a guy, and then he couldn't continue on it. And was really, really certain that he could do it. And I'd explained to him why he could do it and how I would support him and what we would do, but he wasn't going to. And I just sat and I looked at it and I was like, I'm so certain he could do it. Why couldn't I do it? If I can get the funding, then I'm going to go and do this myself. And I took it to a mortgage broker and he said, well, so we need to understand what your portfolio, have you got experience? It's got this portfolio. Can you send me the detail? And I sent it to him and he just laughed. He's like, seriously, Colette, you've got a portfolio that's worth £2 million and it's only leveraged at 50%. It's like, yeah, I didn't know that. Because we operate and we only ever look at what the next job is and what next is to do. So I'd bought these properties 10 years before, between sort of 40,000 and 95,000, and they'd all gone up considerably in value, which I knew, but we weren't taking much more out of them, or when we were just reinvesting. But for each property, I'd never sort of summed it all up. There was never any requirement to. And so then I looked at that and I was like, that is brilliant. And I'd then started learning about private investment. And I thought, well, people are doing this private investment and investing money in people's. Would their money be safer with me? And so I went through all of that again. I was like, yeah, it absolutely would. Went to the development financiers to say, will you lend me the money to buy this building and development? Yes. So then I had everything set up. So I put a pack together, or I put it out to private investors that says we have all the money secured from a development lender. They'll lend us the money to buy the building. They'll lend us the money to draw down and do the development. But they're a pain in the backside to work with. And actually, I'd much rather, if people want to invest with us privately, we pay our interest to lovely people rather than to the investment companies. And it's a balance when we do both. And so we've been doing that for the last year now as well. And most of my investors are women, which is wonderful because they weren't investing before. They were, in the bank or in an ISA, nowhere else were they investing. And to be able to provide something where they feel safe to put their money in and they're seeing their returns is just brilliant.
Yeah. And especially when it is for other women who, let's be honest, this is a big generalization, big sweeping statement coming, but a lot of women fall into the self-depreciating trap, which you just described, oh, but I'm only doing this a little bit and I'm not doing that well. And we very rarely stop and go, actually, I'm freaking smashing this. I'm doing really well, And I'm the same. All my team are women, not intentionally. A lot of my clients are women, not intentionally. And I think it's nice to give a platform and give the opportunities to other women. How have you found it, though, being a female in, let's be frank, a very dominated male industry? Do they treat you differently? Do you get those looks where it's like, oh, she might be the secretary or whatever? Because I've certainly had that in my industry.
Yeah, I love it. I don't care. So I'm a female investor. I just go on and do it. My upbringing was amazing. My mum, my grandma, my Auntie Betty, very matriarchal. There was nothing you couldn't do because you were a woman. And that just wasn't even something that I thought of growing up. It wasn't that I, grew up, I was bolshy, but it wasn't that I grew up like fighting against something. I just did not know that there were things that you shouldn't do because you're a girl. That wasn't something that was in our upbringing. So I just get on and do what I want to do and do my risk assessment and do all of those things and then go make my offers. And I don't worry about it. But yeah, we find now more so because the bigger deals that we're doing, and it is exploding at the moment, the more we're then being pulled into who you're talking to. So when it's an estate agent and I'm putting my offers forward, I do it under a written pack. I was in a group with, or I'm in a group with Sarah Point and Ryan, who taught me to do that, which is a really good process. And I'm really open about what I'm offering, how I'm doing it. So I don't get into we say it's worth this and we're going to offer that and then we'll all negotiate down to here. We just don't entertain that. And it kind of blows people's mind a bit that we do it differently. And we'll be in and we'll have bought a property whilst people are still thinking about how they're going to negotiate it and how they're going to chip money down to get this absolute best price. I very much come at it the other way. They go, what is this worth to me when it's done up? How can we make that the best for both parties involved?
I love that. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, can women be as wealthy as men?
Yes, they can. Individually, we absolutely all can. I think it's going to be a long time before, as a collective, we are there. And I think a lot of that is down to the self-depreciation, as we've just said, the pension gap, all of those things. We need to be able to start teaching our daughters how to manage those things and how to overcome them. To be investing, how to invest safely, how to, manage your own pension or not. If you're not going to have a pension, I spoke to you earlier about Mark Wright. One of the things that he said once is he'll never put money in a pension because no one can invest his money as well as he can. And I really take that on board now and I look at it every time. So I've got a small pension, a little bit of me going, how quickly can I get that out? How do I get that into a SAS? How do I run my own pension that invests in its own commercial properties?
It's about thinking differently though, isn't it? A lot of people go into the pension route because they feel like that's what they've been told to do. That's the most sort of traditional approach. You mentioned Sarah and Mark there. What impact have mentors been in your career and your progression?
Mentors are a brilliant resource. I think they're a fantastic thing because I think they're the people that hold that mirror to you, that help you to go, what is your fact checklist? What are your achievements? What is the impact that you're having, as opposed to the input that you're putting in, which is that piece where we all go, well, I only did this and I just did that I did when I was trying to do that promotion material. Whereas Tony, who was my director and mentor, went, this is the impact that you're having. Very much grown. I apprenticed out of school at 16 with British Aerospace. There was always a mentoring program there. My biggest corporate career roles were with British Aerospace, and then MBDA Systems was the part. And that was a good 10 years in my career. And then 12 years with Accenture. Both of them have strong mentoring and career guidance. And I took that into my entrepreneurial space the same. Knew that was something that I wanted to do. I didn't know about all the property training that's out there. I know now that there's tons and tons of it. I happened upon a 5-day free course that Sarah was giving away, and I thought, well, we'll give that a go. And what she had there is it's called the Cogito Wealth Hub, and it's where everybody's within the same Facebook page, and you can share all of your knowledge. And from there, she was running a business retreat. And I've now done 3 separate business retreats, which I really enjoy. And it's that mentoring space consolidated down to 5 days. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really important to have. And it's finding the right mentor and finding the right person that can pull you on. And I think, again, what we sometimes fall into is you have to fully understand the level that you're at in order to get the right mentor so that they're pushing you hard enough.
Yeah, that was actually be one of my next questions is how have you found mentors? Because, people like Sarah, like Mark Wright, they're quite well known.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point in time you're like, they can't mentor me, they're too far ahead? Or
how did you? Well known at the time. I'm so, because this entrepreneurial space is so new to me that I had no idea. So just through the Facebook groups now, or the social media, and finding all the different ones, I like to go to an individual days and meet people there and get a feel for it. One of the first things that Mark taught was, if you're at the top of the room, you're in the wrong room. I've definitely fallen into that a few times over the last year or so. Again, because I didn't appreciate how well I was doing, because I wasn't making those lists and getting that up there.
Yeah. And what's it been like working with someone like Mark Wright?
He's great. He's really good fun, really nice guy. I did 2 business retreats that he was on, so he sort of mentored us over the 4 or 5 days of those. And then outside of that, very generous with his time in terms of meeting up for lunch, emails, if we need some support. He's the one so we've just set up a new company, and so I met him in the summer, and he's like, Colette, you're still not going big enough. You need to push on. You did this property development. How much time have you spent there? Not a lot, because actually you've set all the right teams in motion. You can do that on a bigger scale. And that's what we've done. And when you talk about women in property, I brought in, so at the same first business retreat, I met Sukhi Kaur. She's amazing. And she runs her own property development group. So she is the queen of construction, and she heads all of that up. So my development that I bought out in Desborough, which is a manor house, we're converting to 8 apartments. It's her site, give her the keys. She's doing the development, the keys will come back, and it's just been an absolute dream. She's amazing.
Wow. So it's what happens when you work with people that you have similar values with, and also just as driven. Gender irrelevant, let's be honest. It's just quite refreshing and quite nice for that. And I think the reason I asked about, working so closely with Mark Wright was I've got some quite well-established mentors, and I love having, a lot of people say to me, Chloe, but most of your mentors are men. You're for female empowerment and you want people to succeed as women. But I often believe that a lot of the men have got there first because of their opportunities in the past. And they can show us the way, and they're still fantastic mentors. And I'm very grateful, because I'm quite similar to you, Colette, where I sort of play down the achievements and my mentors are going, Chloe, no, you need to go bigger. Yeah. You need to be on bigger stage. You need to be doing bigger things. And it's quite reassuring when you hear that.
And I think diversity as well. The more diversity, if you're building a team, the more diversity you can put in that team, the more successful it will be, because you have all of the different views and outputs and experiences. And that's everything from, men and women, and whether you're what your background is, everything. The more diversity you can put into it, the better you'll be. And there's been loads of proven studies on that, and you see it in somewhere like Accenture, where teams can be huge, and the more diversity is there in those teams, the better they succeed.
Yeah. And when it comes to wealth and diversity, how much do you look at other opportunities for wealth, or are you very much sort of sticking with your bread and butter, knowing what you know?
No, I love a bit of diversity. If nothing else, a couple of things back on the risk assessment side. If you can put diversity into your portfolio, you add a massive layer of de-risking for no additional fee. So when we started, we were investing in buy-to-lets. I then tried a holiday let. That went so well that as my properties in Oxfordshire and the Cotswolds gave notice, I changed those to holiday lets, and that's my bigger focus. When COVID came and closed the holiday lets overnight, my buy-to-lets cash flowed well enough that it gave us the time to go, okay, we can't holiday let those anymore. What can we do? And I'm not one for sitting back and getting upset, go, right, we can't do that, but what can we? And that's very much an Accenture-driven trait of being able to pivot and do something different. And those properties that we buy to let cash flowed us well enough that we never went into the red whilst we got the 3 properties converted to do something else with them. So, who could we, you had key workers in, and we had a family came and did a medium term stay, all those sorts of things. And that was driven by the diversity in the portfolio. When I went full time and I was in property and was ready to add these new projects, we have the manor house, as I say, we're converting it into 8 apartments, so 1 and 2 beds predominantly. There's 1 3-bed, and at the same time, I bought Church Green, which is a stunning 5-bed, 4-bathroom holiday let in Witney. And I was running, I do accommodation for loan players for Oxford United. We were renting properties under a rent-to-rent basis for them to be in. That was going brilliantly. They were building a new block. We'll buy some of these as well. So manor house being converted to apartments, Church Green, huge period development, 5-bedroom, beautiful high-end holiday home, and 2 2-bed brand new builds bought off plan, and sourced one of those as well, because they've been fantastic. So we sourced it and ran it, and that's gone really well.
I think it's great though, because it's nice for people who are listening or watching, not thinking, oh, I've got to go down the auction route, I've got to go down this. It's like a lot of people think, because my first property was an off-plan 1-bed development, and I was just doing it like, I honestly ended up as an accidental landlord. I was like, I'm going to live in it. It's a nice new place, whatever. And actually, it's done so well for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, oh no, new builds never make you any money, you know. And I think there's a lot of limited beliefs here. And also, I think a lot of doubt can kick in for people. Now, Colette, you've been able to achieve so much in, let's be real, quite a short space of time, you know, 10, 12 years around that mark. What worries you now? What doubts pop up for you now and then?
I don't really have any at the minute. I'm going to be brave and say I don't have, because I've got to that point of understanding of where we are at. We've just set up a new company, SC Invest, which is with Sukhi. We've brought all the best bits of what we've done together. The hardest part of any property development is financing the deal and finding a builder that's trusted and can deliver on time. When we can join forces, we cover both of those things. Sukhi has a brilliant portfolio behind her, as do I. We've demonstrable to the lenders that we've taken money, we've done the development, we've paid back on time. They want to lend. That's their whole business. If they don't lend to people, they're going out of business. So they want to lend to us. And so we are just going bigger and bigger. And we've now got 4 opportunities in the pipeline where entrepreneurial businesses are setting up new, but they're really well established in what they're doing. And we're saying, well, we can help you because you're going to run this business as your opco. We will buy and fund the development of the building, and then we'll partner together.
Wow. So what would you do differently if you look back, knowing what you know now?
I'd do it all sooner, and I'd have gone bigger sooner. I'd be more aware of my successes. I'd be more confident in what I've done. I'd take more pride in that. And it wasn't that I was trying to be self-depreciating. I just never looked at that. I just only ever looked at, well, what's what's the next problem, or what didn't go quite right, and what should we have done better. In one of the developments that we've just done, I was talking to my property manager about us getting up and running, and we're a little bit behind where we would have wanted to be when we first started. And you start thinking, oh, well, if I'd have done this differently or that differently, and I'd have to say, hang on a minute, at no point in time during those couple of months were we just sitting on our backsides doing nothing. We were running all of the other properties at the same time. You know, with hindsight, they're not the things. Actually, it's look at what we've achieved and how we take this forward. So yeah, I'd have gone bigger sooner. I'd have come out of corporate sooner, probably. But I loved it. I loved being at Accenture. I missed the people. I had breakfast with one yesterday, and like to catch up with them when I'm in town.
Yeah, I think that's really refreshing though, because a lot of people that do make it as either speakers, podcasters, or, you know, like personal brands, they're doing it. They've left their previous life, as I would call it, and it's not from either on good terms or because they wanted to change. They actually wanted to walk away from something or run away from something, depending on how it was. Whereas I've noticed throughout the whole interview, you're just very grateful for them and what you've learned from them.
Yeah, and then I think I mentioned it before. It's always, for me, if you can understand what your worst case scenario is and can you manage that, and what would you do in the worst case. And when I came out of Accenture and set up, at first my plan was to set up my property consultancy and set up as a commercial consultant at the same time, so that I could do some day work for people like Accenture and other companies, and that would be my safety net. And then sort of the penny drop that if I do that, I'm always going to be I'm going to be too scared to make the leap and give up that income. That's the scariest thing. The day that I decided to put myself forward for the redundancy, I was on holiday, and the next day in the press was the UK is officially in recession. Like, brilliant timing. And so I spoke to Craig about it again, and he's always been a fantastic support. And he just said to me, if you think you can do it, I know you can, just go for it. But I had to have that safety net. And so that was always it. And you do have a wobble. I don't think you can set up in business on your own and not have a wobble. And particularly because you are on your own most of that time. And one of the ladies that I worked for at Accenture, a lady called Susan, she's amazing and was such an inspiration throughout my time there. And she just said to me, what are you worried about? Because they'll take you on day rate tomorrow. And you're like, yep, Yep, that's true. You know, there'll always be a position for you to go back to, and that becomes your safety net. And you go, well, for as long as I feel that that's there, we can push on again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the best part though, is I think a lot of people go with the emotion when things go wrong and like the wobbles and so on. Have you ever wobbled with the financial crisis? Because, you know, we've got recession here and COVID and whatever. How have you managed to keep going through all of that?
Yes, the biggest wobble probably was the manor house is being converted under permitted development. And that should be a process of you put your forms into the council, it's 6 weeks, and they either come back and say yes, or they don't come back at all, and then it's deemed acceptance, or they come back and say no, and you do some things. And that process, the council just didn't stick to it. They asked lots of questions. It just delays and delays and delays, and you haven't really got any way to go back at it. There's no commercial side to dealing with the council. You've just got to go with whatever's happening, because what's your option? You start raising complaints and then it just becomes even more awkward. So we had a really big delay, and I was starting to worry on that one. And I was again talking to Craig about it, and he's like, you know, at which point do we flip it back into auction? I bought this under auction conditions. I secured it outside of auction, but still under auction conditions. And I was like, right, I just need to go and sit down and spend some time running those numbers again. And I ran the numbers, and everything that I'd done before on that risk assessment side was, yes, we want it under permitted development, but if we don't, what will the costs be? So all of the costs, when I put a project together, you work on worst case scenario. And so everything had been put together on a worst case scenario, and it hadn't come to fruition. A lot of that had gone through without. So things like it was commercial, but it had been commercial for a long time. There wasn't a piece of paper from the council that said this is commercial. It's just that it had been being run as offices for a really long time. So we'd had to allow for, well, what if in the end of it they say your stamp duty is going to be higher? Because under a normal sale, you'd have had some room to go back and negotiate that. But under an auction condition, you don't. So I'd had to allow for all that worst case scenario. None of that came to fruition. So even with this 6-month delay, when I finished my numbers, I was in a better position than the day I made the bid. And I ran them 3 times because like that does it. And there's like, actually, yeah, we're okay. We're still okay, and we can move forward.
Yeah. But you still come back down to the logic and numbers every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest difference I've seen in businesses that do well and those that don't. It's just when you lean into with emotion, logic goes lower, you know, so you need to focus on the logic every time. Yeah. Now, we've talked a bit about mentors, and in our show, we always have our final 4 questions around looking at, you know, who has supported you on your journey. So I'm curious, Colette, who has inspired you on your journey?
Sukhi. For definite. Sukhi, I met on our very first Ibiza retreat, which would have been 2021, I think, 2021. And she was just amazing. She'd grown a business from, not just from nothing, but from a negative position. So her husband, Harry's also amazing. He'd been a builder for a really long time. Went into partnership with somebody, and they were going to do the business and going to do this project. It didn't go. There were some problems, and the person doing the business side basically wasn't. And Sukhi stepped in. So she found a solution. She took it to the client. So we're going to get this sorted. We need a bit more time, but they didn't take any more money. They self-funded, got it done. So at the end of that project, they had to go again because they were in a negative position. And then from there, she's just smashed it, and she's now like multi-million turnover. I think she's got about 40 million on her order book. She's doing a development that's 140 apartments.
Wow.
In a 5-year period, in the middle of which she had another baby. So Yuvraj has just turned 3.
Oh my gosh.
She's absolutely phenomenal. 4 children altogether from 21 to 3. Incredible business. And I always knew I'd love to work for her because I was sitting at the other side of this table going, she's amazing. And because I think even at that point, I probably hadn't appreciated my portfolio, and I definitely was feeling the lacking of confidence. I didn't really speak to anybody in that first week, that very first retreat that we went on, because I just didn't feel like I fitted in the room. I wasn't good enough, which is crazy looking back. But I'd never done that self-work of understanding exactly where I was at. And I was literally sitting there going, well, if I can just, get some consultancy work, and if I can just do this. But I'd have loved to work with Sukhi. And then 12 months later, took her the manor house, and she is based in Sheffield. And I was saying, but she was working as far south as Leicester. And I joked and said, it's this far on the map, which I expected her to check. And she didn't. And she took me at my word. But she came and did my development on the manor house. And it's just been a dream. I've literally give her the keys, and they get in touch with things like, they'll ring me and say, there was a problem. This was the solution. It's done. Or there's a problem. These are the two options. We recommend X because of, whichever. And we crack on.
Wow.
And it's been great. And then from there, and understanding how it can work, and we've spent a lot of time mentoring each other. We've now put this new business together, which we just incorporated on Monday to take forward bigger investments where, on this one, I've bought the property and Sukhi's developing it for me. She's working for some big clients that are buying big properties, and she's doing the development. What we'll do together is buy those big developments ourselves and be our own client for Build For You.
Wow. It sounds so exciting just to see how far you can go, and the fact that she started off as someone you were like, oh, I'd love to work with her.
Yeah.
And now she's a partner of yours. Now, Colette, for me, I'm a book publisher. So I read a lot of books and I love learning from books. Never used to like reading books, to be fair, when I was younger, but I'm definitely hooked on them now. And so I always like to ask our guests, what book has helped you or inspired you on the journey?
I'm giggling because I'm going to get in trouble. I feel like if there's a way to be ejected from being an entrepreneur, like to be sacked from being an entrepreneur for like gross misconduct, this would be the one. I don't think I've ever read a business book.
Any other books?
And that goes against all of my mentors' advice. I've definitely got some in the bookshelf.
Yeah.
But if everything that I do, reading for me is my downtime. So I think I'll try a little bit of reading a business book. And I'm like, that's my downtime. That's my relax. So if I'm going to find time to read, and I do, then it'll be Grisly Murders or...
No way, I love that.
Yeah. So I don't think I've read.
Well,
do you know what? Bad, isn't it?
Do you know what, though? It's not. I think, if anything, that's inspiring for anyone watching or listening, that because there's a lot of pressure. I know when I first started, it's like, I've not heard of that author and I've not read that book before I started book publishing, obviously. But like a lot of people were like, oh, you need to read this. Have you read that? Even me as a publisher, I get people sat where you are and they're like, oh, this is the book that changed my life. And I'm like, I've not read that book.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that author. And there's that pressure of, I can't be an entrepreneur unless I've read XYZ book, And I actually really love the honesty to go, do you know what? I haven't, but I love those fiction books.
And I knew that was going to be a question, and I was a little bit like, oh, do I quickly think of one? I'm sure I've got some in my bookshelf. Like, what can I? And I was like, no, just go and be honest. You can't fib about that. You just need to go and be honest. So I know I need to read some. I know I've got some in there, but then maybe that's just that thing of doing things differently. As I say, on the property side, it feels quite a small world once you start building your social media with property people, and whoever, I'll go, oh, you must know this person because they do this training and that training. I was like, I didn't even know there was property training when I started doing this. That wasn't part of my world, and I've just done it through what comes logically to me from my commercial and contract background, because property is just business. So it is a contract, but you've got bricks and mortar security there. So it doesn't have to be dealt with differently. And I look at it through that business lens exactly the same as I would with any other business.
Yeah, it's such a smart way of looking at it. Well, maybe the first book that you can read will be your own.
I don't. Someone said, I'm doing some work with Danny Wallace. She's amazing to help with the public speaking and all of that. And on one of our one-to-ones the other week, she's like, so you need to write a book. Genuinely is the thing I would least like to do in life.
No way. Why?
I'd die of procrastination. I'd never get it done. I just can't imagine sitting down and writing a book, but maybe one day.
Yeah. That's the thing though, and trust me, like as a publisher, the amount of people that come to me and go, I'll come to you when I've written the book. That's the reason why we do coaching and mentoring and accountability through it, because I'm like, sure, I'll speak to you in a couple of years. On your own, it's so easy to procrastinate.
Yeah.
Because book writing is not something, it's not a quick thing. And it's also, I wrote my first book in 10 days, but that's because I'd overcommitted myself and put my big girl pants on and set a date that was so unrealistic, it's unreal. But I think it's about finding what you would want to write about, and then the passion kind of kicks in.
Yeah.
If you were to write a book, what would you write about?
Oh, God knows. That's a really difficult one. Probably the piece that I'm most passionate about is helping people to understand and own their brilliance. That's what I talk about. That's what I like to be on stage talking about, and getting them to understand that all that self-depreciating language, when people don't understand what they are brilliant at, they say, go and have a think about how you talk about yourself. And where you're using words like, I just do this, or I'm lucky because, I will bet money that the words that trip off the end of that sentence is what you're amazing at. So when I hear people say, I'm lucky because I've got an amazing team or amazing clients, well, why is that? Why have you got amazing clients? Do you think it might be because you're pretty amazing at what you do? Because when I do those talks and I help with those really simple steps of how you can make your fact check list, how much easier it is to stand up and go, I've done these things. The response from that, from women that have come and said, I launched a new product because I understood how good I was and that I could do this. And had someone come to me, I was at a black tie ball, and she said, Colette, I've really got to speak to you. We talked, I understood what you meant. I took it to one of my mentees. We wanted to get her onto my team, but she was through a promotion route in the NHS. And she said, I just can't, because I'll be awful in the interview and I can't do this. We went through your steps in a logical way. She took it into the interview, smashed it, and got the job. Like, those sort of things just fill me with all of the joy. That's what I'd like to do. God knows how I'd get it into a book, but that's what I'd like to do. I'll just keep talking about it. I don't mind standing on stage and talking about it. I find that really inspiring. I get a buzz off it. It's exciting. You've got to go to places. Sitting down at my desk and writing that, I'm not sure I have the ability to do that, to knuckle down. And my finance lady will just say, you just don't have the focus for it.
But you know what? That's the best thing. My second book was actually just all my talks, repurposed, rewritten, because if you can speak, you can write. It's just how you get it on the paper. So we'll never know. We may see the book yet.
Never say never.
Never say never. Now, our final question on the show, Colette, is always based on who you know that has an inspiring story. So my question for you is, who do you know that has an inspiring story that you think we should have on the show next?
So Sukhi would be brilliant. Obviously, I've already talked you through her. Mark is amazing, definitely. But somebody a bit different, a lady called Z West, who I only met just before Christmas. We met at an event. She's an entrepreneur. She lives near me. We met for lunch, and she's setting up her own bank, which just blew me away. I was like, I'd love to talk to you about that and just understand a little bit more about it. And again, very much focused on that wealth side and the gap between men and women in their finance and in their investing. Anybody that's less well off, how difficult it is in times of crisis, and putting a bank together and things that support it. So she's putting together a bank, and then she's also putting together a dating app and website, but that's very much focused on your self-belief and self-love first, because of how difficult that space is as well. So she's phenomenal.
Wow.
She is connected. She's so well connected, and she takes everything in, and she's such a supporter. So it was through Z that she understood what I was doing and said, come and speak to Emphis, who wants to build a animation studio because they've got a film in the works. They are looking to be the next Pixar, a UK Pixar, sorry, and want to build their own studio. And we, Sukhi and I, SC Invest, are now buying that studio and developing it. We just got the offer accepted yesterday, which is amazing. And all of that has come through Z, just connecting all of those those dots. She's incredible.
Wow. Oh, what I'd love to
Yeah,
have
definitely speak to her.
all three of them, Sukhi, Mark and Z. Let's make it
Yeah.
happen. Well, Colette, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've thoroughly loved talking to you about the money side, the finance, property, but also the self-belief side. It's just been really interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I was petrified, but I really enjoyed it.
Well, you survived. You survived. And I hope it wasn't quite as scary as you
it was
thought it
great.
might be. Oh, thank you so much, lovely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you have enjoyed Colette's episode. If you haven't already, do make sure you share in the comments, what has it been that Colette has shared here today that has been most inspiring for you? And obviously, if you're interested in looking into property, then do reach out to her, and SC Invest, I'm sure, will be able to support you. Now, also, don't forget, if you're on our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts, make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you don't miss our next inspiring guest, and I'll see you next week.